What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And Happy New Year.
Oh, yeah.
It's officially 2018, guys. 2017 is behind us. Fingers crossed for 2018 because we're hoping for some positivity in our lives because we had a lot of negativity in 2017. A lot of good things, but still a lot of negativity. And we have a good episode on this one, guys. We have Steven Spielberg Part 2. Because last week we did Part 1 where we talked about a lot of sci-fi, a lot of genre films that Steven Spielberg is known for. But in this episode, we're going to talk about a lot of his historical films, a lot of his dramas, a lot of his more grounded, serious stuff that, you know, Spielberg is also known for. Because he's known for both. He can give you the big blockbuster and he can give you the intimate, you know, Academy Award type film that people like watching as well. So Steven Spielberg is, again, what many consider to be one of the greatest directors of all time. He's able to give you such diverse films and different perspectives in different films. And it's incredible what he's able to do. I'm still baffled by it every time. And, you know, it's one of those things where when you measure your favorite filmmakers, a lot of people have Spielberg at the top. And it's one of the things that was interesting watching the Spielberg documentary was his ability to be self-aware, to be aware of his positioning as far as an artist, and to be aware of the type of films he makes. Because a lot of people say that he's, you know, when he was coming out with Jaws and when he was coming out with all these types of films, a lot of people were calling him a very commercial director. And there's nothing wrong with being a commercial director. But he definitely wanted to step out of his own shadow of blockbusters. And he wanted to challenge himself for making films that can be a little bit more on the artistic, auteur side of directing. Because he was competing with, and he was a very competitive guy, and he was competing with his friends who were like Martin Scorsese and
Francis Ford
Coppola, Brian De Palma. All of these people are his friends. So he hangs out with them. So he did feel a little bit inclined to dive into a different genre, different type of film, which is, you know, these types of emotional driven, you know, type films. And a lot of films that will connect to the fans and the critics as far as, you know, the type of movies that he's making. So, obviously, Sugarland Express was Spielberg's first official feature film. And it's what gave him the ability to make his other films, and it's interesting because it was critically accepted well. People,
especially for a first time,
for a debut director, they said it's one of the best debut directors, one of the best debuts for a director. And it's interesting because we have so many directors now making incredible debuts, like Jordan Peele and Greta Gerwig this past year in 2017 with
Lady Bird, Get Out.
I mean, there's an incredible amount of those people, but Spielberg was one of them with Sugarland Express. And following Sugarland Express, Spielberg wanted to adapt a book, which again he's known for, which is The Color Purple.
Right. I mean, of course, there's the Jaws and the ETs and all that comes in between that, but you know, in terms of a serious motion picture,
he wanted to step out of that, you know, Jaws and E.T. and all these, you know, crazy pictures, and he wanted to make a more serious type movie with The Color Purple, he wanted to specifically make it a different perspective than we've seen before, and that's, you know, the, you know, African American, you know, it's
about the African American experience in the Deep South during this time of incredible prejudice. You know, a lot of expectations societally that this movie is dealing with. This movie, you're right, it's adapted from this book, and I can't remember the author's name offhand, but, you know, it's one of the seminal African-American tales that we have in modern literature in terms of capturing the ideological misfortunes that a culture is put under, specifically for African-American women, right? This movie stars Whoopi Goldberg, Oprah Winfrey.
A young Whoopi Goldberg, a young Oprah, obviously names that we know, but it's crazy seeing them in this movie when you rewatch it, because you're like, that's Oprah. That's Whoopi Goldberg. That's crazy.
And it's a very traditionally, you know, the book deals a lot in the idea of the patriarchy kind of putting their thumb over the women, right? The way that our society is structured, so male dominant, male focused. This movie's all about a woman exploring what is outside of the patriarchy, and how even the African American experience only further, lends itself to that, because after so many years of oppression and slavery, and this is something that we see in other Spielberg movies that are going to come up later, Amistad, Lincoln, the idea of how slavery has put these extraordinary circumstances on the African American family, and this is where the lineage for Spielberg doing this kind of begins. Of course, he relates a lot, in terms of his cultural background. He's Jewish, of course. That experience of the Holocaust and internment is kind of what he adapts here, and at least in relating to the African American experience of how the turmoils of the past lead to the grief of the present. But I think where this movie lies, especially in comparing to its adaptation, is that instead of focusing more on like the relationship aspects with the lesbian relationship aspects, and it instead chooses to focus more on the oppression of these women. And I think that's a very interesting way Spielberg went.
Yeah, a lot of people give him crap for it now. That why did he shy away from that? But I feel like, do you feel like he was playing a little bit too safe with that, or do you feel like he went the right direction, focusing on specifically the racial oppression and like you said, the matriarchy versus the patriarchy?
Right. No, I think that's the direction for Spielberg to be able to conquer, because I mean, if I'm being frank, and this is 1985, so 1984. So we weren't seeing a lot of people of color, women of color behind the camera. And frankly, and I think he would have thought this too, it would have come off of a little exploitative to have like these kind of sex scenes and undercurrent themes between two black women. It would have been really weird, I think, for him to approach it in that way. And he himself felt a little embarrassed approaching those topics in this material. So I don't know, and it's also the novel is a lot grittier. It's a lot more realistic. It's more about internal turmoil too, which is hard to express inside of a major motion picture. Whereas in a book, you could kind of go from different perspectives, first person perspective. And a movie is more about the external. So you have to vocalize a lot of what's happening here in a big way. But I think he does that. I don't really want to spoil this movie, because I think people should go out and watch this film. It's a real treat of a movie, even though it's made in the 1980s. I think it still holds up really well. I kind of disagree with the critics, where they're saying, a lot of critics would argue that, it's a little too whitewashed, or not whitewashed because there's not really a lot of white people in it, but a little too like watered down, a little too,
safe, a little too safe. Yeah. Versus the novel that it's adapted being so gritty and so realistic and so in your face.
Yeah.
And this one being much more played down and much more safer, I guess, is the way.
Yeah. So I think it's crazy how the movie's going for that. So I mean, it really does go for a lot of the big, impactful stuff. I mean, there's that great scene that is like kind of transcended this film, where Oprah's like, all my life I've had to fight. You know what I mean? Like, and all of that. So again, and this movie was, even when it came out, it was nominated for 11 Academy Awards. Did very well commercially, and I think the hand of Steven Spielberg kind of guiding this movie and guiding these performances. You talk about Oprah, you talk about
Whoopi
Goldberg, and all the other cast members in this movie. Incredible performances, and we how many stars have birthed out of this, right? Like, talking about literally Oprah Winfrey, one of the few billionaires in the world. This is one of her first major motion pictures, right? Whoopi Goldberg, big star, The View and all that stuff. So, and all the other I'm not remembering exactly who was in this movie, but the themes that they're approaching here, write a very fine line between being over the top and being over sentimental, but because it feels so real, and because Spielberg directs with this kind of grace, this kind of naturalism, this feel that puts you in the environment of the Deep South and where this film takes place. it feels right to me. So
I want to ask you specifically, first of all, what was the African American reception of this film? I don't know off the top of my head. That's first. And then the second question I want to ask you, as far as having a director like Steven Spielberg being, like you said before, a Jewish director, but also being a white director, taking on these themes, these, very intimate, very delicate African American themes. Obviously, we see that all the time, but I want to talk about it specifically with this film because I feel that that's very important, specifically referring the similarities to Mudbound in this film, specifically with some moments and the setting and all that. And Mudbound being directed by
Dee Reeves,
a black woman, versus
black lesbian woman too. So
directed by Steven Spielberg, who's a much more big commercial white director. What do you think about that? First of all, with the reception.
Well, I haven't really seen a lot of people talk about this movie in a negative way. I watched this movie when I was a kid quite a few times because I grew up in a very matriarchal female household. Mm-hmm. So watching this movie as a kid, that was very important. To me, at least, experiencing that movie that way. But that being said, I mean, outside of my personal family, I haven't really seen. It's easy for a movie like this to get a lot of backlash, right? I mean, the way it's handling, it's portraying this stuff. But to be frank, a lot of African American studies courses are still incorporating this movie into the curriculum because it speaks so potently to what they're trying to go for. Even though Spielberg's a white dude and he's Jewish or whatever. He's still approaching a lot of these heavy themes with enough care and enough respect to make it hit really hard. It would have been easy for this movie to be overly political or overly racially charged and overly racially motivated. But what I love about this movie is that you don't really, you get stuff like the N-word every now and then, or uses or reuses of the N-word or Negro or whatever. But that. And you get the racial themes, of course, but it's really underlying. What was really at the top here is the struggle of these women, what they're going through, the oppression of being stuck under this male the male thumb that really presses under, and especially for somebody like Spielberg, who a lot of his main characters in his movies are male protagonists, but even then he kind of Color Purple is female led, Sugarland Express is female led, and a couple of his others, but they're mostly male characters, right? But the fact that he was able to take that away from the source material and adapt that in a way that felt natural and cast the supporting cast of people who really understood the material as well. It really was like, as a director, Spielberg kind of took the backseat and let the actors take the reign, right? And let that be the storytelling mechanism. Not a lot of flashy camera movements, not a lot of over-the-top editing. It's really more about the performances and the writing. And the music, by the way, I didn't even mention that. It's something so soft and so precious. This is the first Spielberg movie that wasn't composed by John Williams, and one of his only ones that wasn't composed by John Williams, composed by Quincy Jones, did the score for this. So again, it re-emphasizes the thematic, like, kind of anger, softness, fear that the perspective of this movie is taking place under. So,
what do you have you seen Mudbound, first of all?
I haven't seen all of it. No, I haven't seen all of it, but I'm familiar with the story that they're telling.
Yeah, I obviously, if you haven't seen it, I don't want to make you kind of relate to it at all, right. But I was definitely curious about that specifically. You're right. It does have, like, it's very much like it's an African American female perspective.
Right.
Versus the African American male perspective that we get in a lot of movies, mm-hmm. which is a very distinctive feel. You said before the kind of Academy Award reception this film got. I want to talk to you about something else specifically, is that we always joke, and you always joke, about how, like, the Academy Award always wants to nominate that black movie.
Yeah, the one black movie.
I want to talk about, like, something like Moonlight, or something where sometimes Hollywood, specifically the Academy, kind of, and this is like they get some badass. I forget the name of the guy who directed Moonlight. What's his name?
Barry Jenkins.
I mean, dude, the guy's a badass. Like,
Yeah.
say what you want, the guy's a badass.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you get a lot of movies that a ton of white people love about black people. Like you get that like white people love the shit out of the Django,
Yeah.
but they love, like, I mean, obviously
12 Years a
Tarantino.
Slave, too.
But white people loving movies about black people and black people being in certain situations versus the black audience not necessarily always loving those movies, and getting those two perspectives and getting the black perspective versus the white perspective, and then obviously it getting all the awards, but all the awards come from white people.
Right.
You know, the people voting aren't really black people; they're white people voting for the black people films that they feel properly represent a culture and a people that they're not. They're not that culture and they're not that people. I want to talk to you about that, specifically with Moonlight, right? I mean,
Right.
I'm curious, does that make a distinction as far as, like, man, all these white people are liking this movie about slaves, and it's like, I don't give a shit about this movie, and I'm black.
You know, I think particularly with movies that now I think it's starting to change a little bit. I think when The Color Purple came out, let's be real, there weren't a lot of like black movies. So I'm sure, you know, I mean, I wasn't around when that came out, but a lot of African Americans are just happy to see some sort of representation on screen, right? And even that, you know, it wasn't like dangerously like overly, you know, trying to be sentiment. It wasn't like Driving Miss Daisy, right? That's like an offensively like racial movie. You know what I mean? Like that is offensive. It offends me, especially considering that came out the same year as Do the Right Thing, which is an overly pro-black movie, but didn't get any Oscar recognition. But speaking to The Color Purple, there isn't anything that's like offensively, like overtly bad or racially disrespectful in this.
Not disrespectful, but overtly like I'm trying to get an Oscar.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's funny you say that because this movie does. I mean, it panders to Oscars, I think, more on an emotional level.
Sure.
Right, and then, but again, that's part of the story that they're trying to tell.
Sure.
And that's part of the source material. But in terms of more modern movies, I mean.
Yeah, I'm curious because we saw Moonlight together.
Yeah.
And your first impressions weren't that impressed.
Yeah, I wasn't either,
but you weren't specifically.
I grew to enjoy that movie a lot more as time went by and I experienced it more. My problem with that movie was more when I walked out of it was that I was expecting more of like a realism kind of approach to that story.
And you got more of an artistic.
Yeah, more of artistic, stylish, you know, which is fine. I'm all for that. And especially watching it more and more now, I got what they were going for. You know, and I'm glad that an artistic movie actually
won Best Picture.
Yeah, an artistic movie by a black director won Best Picture. And, you know, but I think for most black audiences, we kind of get tired of the 12 Years a Slave getting nominated again, Django getting nominated again, The Help getting nominated. You know, all of these movies about black people that are oppressed, frankly, getting nominations and awards, and even Moonlight to a certain extent, but Moonlight was more of a representation of LGBT as well, and more of a...
How did that go through? Because I think you talked about it a little bit as far as the black gay,
masculinity.
Black gay,
yeah. Well, you know, that, I mean, I love the movie, you know, so I think that also that helps with its reception, and a lot of African Americans love that movie as well. You know, of course, there are going to be people who are homophobic that have a problem with that
within the African American community.
Yeah, but there's also a fair argument to be made that, you know, at least in modern context, we're not, you know, I don't know how good of an argument it is to make, but there's an argument that, you know, the Best Picture winners either have to be the black Best Picture nominees or winner either have to be slave movies or gay movies. You know what I mean? What's the Will Smith one that he did like early on in his career, 6 Degrees of Separation, where he plays a gay dude. You know, no offense to that, and I disagree with that ideology. I think that's horribly misconstrued. But you know, again, a lot of people want to see themselves represented on television and on film in a way that they find respectful, and especially with Moonlight coming out in the era where we got like movies like Empire or shows like Empire, which is also a big LGBT, impactful television show with the African American cast. So again, there's a lot of aspects of it that influence a lot of different factors in it. But
sure,
I think overall though, I think a lot of black people are just tired of seeing The Help The Help, literally The Help being nominated for Best Picture. You know what I mean? Like, or 12 Years, or we could go through all
you're
the
tired of
Oscar years.
You're tired of seeing movies of people kicking the shit out of black
Exactly.
people.
And then, you know, when
It's like, man, I love that movie where they beat the shit out of that black guy. And that's a good movie.
Meanwhile, movies like Selma have a hard time getting
Straight Outta Compton.
Creed, movies that really do celebrate.
Creed was badass.
Yeah, movies that celebrate modern black culture, and then even going back to the '90s. I mean, Boys in the Hood getting nominations, Driving Miss Daisy, where a dude's literally a driver. Meanwhile, we have this empowering pro-black movie, Do the Right Thing, not getting Oscar nominations. Boys in the Hood was a black director, but it was more of a story. Again, more of a story of a struggle, more of a story of the inner city. But that did really well Oscar-wise too, though.
You're saying it should be both. It
should be a balance. Exactly. And I think especially when it comes to like black directors too, because a lot of times when it's a big black Oscar movie, it's either Quentin Tarantino, frankly, or
another white guy.
Yeah, another white guy. So, but now I'm loving that we're seeing like Steve McQueen having his shot. You know, even though he didn't win Best Director that year, 12 Years a Slave came out. You know, he did direct that movie, and it did end up winning Best Picture.
One thing I can say is that it has, and this is, I know you guys are probably thinking, you know, this is a Steven Spielberg conversation. I feel like this is still relevant because the color purple leads to this conversation, and it sparks the conversation into modern times, because guess what? We're in modern times. And I feel like it is important because of the Academy and because of the Academy Award nomination that the color purple got. That this is a relevant conversation. But go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I think it's also fair to say, you know, this movie did get nominated for a lot of Oscars.
Sure.
1-0.
Good point. But it's one of those things though that I feel like one thing positive you can't say about those movies that a lot of people might feel like, a lot of African American community might feel like, man, you know, they're just treating us like shit, and then we win an Oscar.
Yeah.
And white people love that shit. It's one of those things, though, that it did launch a lot of great careers. I mean, Lupita Nyong'o being one, specifically from 12 Years a Slave. Steve McQueen being another, right? I mean, that guy wasn't that famous before. I mean, he did Shame.
Hunger and Shame, yeah.
Dude, have you seen Shame?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Movie.
It's an incredible movie.
Yeah.
And he's obviously a fan of Michael Fassbender, too.
Yeah.
Because he works with him a lot. But it's still, I think that's great. I think no matter what, you get talent. You get people who, Barry Jenkins, you get people who are badass talent being, you know, observed, and I think that's always important.
I'm sorry to cut you off again.
Go for it.
I think that's why I'm excited to see something like Get Out perform at the Academy Awards.
And you know what's crazy is that Get Out is one of those movies. It's my movie of the year, and it's my movie of 2017 for a reason. A lot of people now might, you know, they just want that black movie. No, it really isn't. I saw this movie with my mom, who's Latina, who doesn't speak English at all, and we saw it. She fucking loved it. I saw this movie with my dad, who's Mexican, and he saw this movie. He loved it. This movie can reach Mexicans, white people, black people. This isn't just about. It is a black film, and it is about blackness and all this stuff. But it's a movie that can go past that. It's a horror movie. It's tension filled. It's fun. It's funny. It's emotional. It's interesting.
99% Rotten Tomatoes.
It's sci-fi. It's both sci-fi and it's both realistic. It's relevant. It's socially relevant. To me, this movie's badass on so many levels that I get tired of people saying, you know, black this, black that. It is, but at the same time, I feel like people can appreciate art when it's fucking badass art, no matter what.
Yeah.
So that's my spiel on Get Out. But I do want to say that, you know, it is interesting because the Academy usually does cater to those movies, and I'm obviously we're in January 2nd right now, but I'm predicting that Get Out's gonna sweep the Oscars. And I know that might be like, well, what about, you know, Gary Oldman? All right, Gary Oldman's gonna kick ass, but I'm saying I guarantee Get Out will shock a lot of people. To be honest, I might be speaking too soon. Get Out, Best Picture winner.
Really?
Not even Best Picture nom. It's gonna get a nom.
Yeah.
It might even get winner.
Really?
I'm riding that wave so hard for this movie, and I loved it that much, and my family loved it that much, and my friends loved it that much. My friends who are white loved it that much. It's that good of a movie. Yeah. It's that badass of a debut. It's that crazy of a script. It's that cool for sci-fi, and it's that cool for for African American community.
And I think especially why, so many African Americans have responded so well to Get Out is because it challenges the portrayal of African Americans, not just in horror movies, just in movies in general, right? The whole idea of the black man being able to outsmart this, these circumstances, this basically trapped in the house of like Stanford wives or whatever. Now he's able to outsmart every other character in this movie. Speaks highly to what we're used to seeing in traditional horror movies.
I think essentially what The Color Purple is bringing us into a conversation of is based on the Academy Awards. The Academy is starting to grow and get more, get smarter and not just cater towards oppression movies getting nominated. So I think it's interesting hearing that from
this movie broke the gate for that in a lot of ways, because before this, I mean, really the only movies that you saw black movies that you saw get nominated for Best Picture were either like Sidney Poitier, and that's it. Like, really, if Sidney Poitier was in it, it was, he would have a good chance of getting some Academy Award looks. But really, outside of that, there weren't really any black movies that were getting the attention that they deserved. So I'm glad. And even with Sidney Poitier movies, it was either like Guess Who's Coming Home for Dinner, about a black man coming home to a white family, or the other one, In the Heat of the Night, which is a legitimately great film on its own, but it's more about like a police procedural under the guise of racial oppression in the South as well, in Mississippi. But with The Color Purple, it really opened up the floodgates for allowing African American women to have the spotlight too.
And that's different.
Yeah, it's different, exactly. And the fact that Spielberg took the risk, and he honestly, he'd probably be the only one who was able to get a movie like that made. I mean,
that's a good point.
Being frank, I mean, using
your power for good, using your enormous name to get into a film from a different, diverse perspective.
Right. So yeah, again, and not beating us over the head with it, and making it an underlying current, but still having a main objective to the story with these characters. That's what's most important here. So,
awesome. Let's move on to Empire of the Sun, which is the next film of his that is also kind of historical and dramatic and all that.
Early Christian Bale.
Christian Bale, man. Yeah. Christian Bale, I'm telling you right now, is going to go down as one of the greatest actors of all time. That guy is incredible. Like he can transform himself. He's one of those actors like. Have you seen pictures of him playing the freaking George Bush movie that's coming out?
Yeah.
He's playing what's his name? The vice
Dick Cheney.
Dick Cheney.
Yeah.
Dude, he looks like a monster. Like the guy, like a lot of people might overestimate the transformation of him, but I feel like that it's incredible what he can do, and seeing that talent as a child, and seeing how it can start as a child, how a child can give that kind of a performance that he gives in this movie, Empire of the Sun, is incredible. Yeah. It's incredible, and it's heartbreaking. He breaks your heart in this movie.
Really?
Little Christian Bale is like, dude, he gives some moments in this movie where you're like, damn, like a child shouldn't experience this type of horror and this type of, harsh reality and this type of growing up. Like Steven Spielberg said in an interview, it's about a kid growing up in a very harsh world when he shouldn't be, when he should be a child, when he should just be enjoying life, when he should be experiencing childhood at the highest level. And I talked to you before, I forget about what, I think we were talking about Rian Johnson a while back, but about the because we were talking about Looper and we were talking about The Rainmaker, and how important it is for a child to have a childhood, and how important it is for a child to have a balanced, joyful childhood, because he's able to receive that kind of mental stability and go into the real world and go into life as a mentally stable person who experienced a good childhood, versus people who have had rough childhoods is usually experience mental health problems and mental health issues because they're not ready for that harsh reality at such a young age. And it's crazy because he breaks your heart in this movie, man. And this is another, I feel, great Steven Spielberg film that really gives a lot of emotion and iconic shots and incredible moments and difficult moments that really stick with you.
Yeah, I mean, that whole moment at the beginning where he actually loses his parents during... This takes place in Shanghai at the beginning of World War II, if I'm not mistaken, when the Japanese were invading China. So it opens the film with this really heartbreaking sequence where Christian Bale's like losing his parents, and he's like losing them in the crowd, and they're just getting shuffled away and put away, and he just has to live on his own, like in this empire, like trying to figure out like how to navigate through this world. And even though this is not science fiction, it still has that level of awe, right? Like as Christian Bale's character being the POV for this film, you're really getting the sense of like an unexplored territory, right? And whereas we mentioned in last week's episode with Temple of Doom not really being the most progressive movie, right, when it comes to representing Asian culture, this movie actually highlights a lot of those aspects really well, and gives attention to the cultural foundation that a lot of the setting is set in. So I think this movie is powerful in the ways that it's opening the eyes to a lot of people who didn't know these experiences were happening, who aren't familiar with the internment camps that are happening in China and in Japan, even in the United States itself. I mean, the U.S. was literally locking up Japanese people like off the streets during the 1940s. Like, that is crazy, So a lot of that internal American conflict kind of externalizing itself in this movie kind of gives it a place. It's kind of flipping the situation, right? What if, not if a Japanese family is trapped in the United States? What if an American kid is trapped, not Japanese, of course, but in China? And I think it's just fascinating the way it approaches that.
Yeah, it obviously has different iconic shots, incredible shots. The visuals in this movie are spectacular.
Yeah.
Like, spectacular.
Yeah.
Like, rewatching it, you still holds up today as being one of the most incredible shots that I've seen in movies. One thing I do want to say is that you're right, man. It really deals with different things that kind of go unnoticed during that era. It's incredible because a buddy of mine had a really long conversation about Japan and in the 1940s Japan, and how, dude, they were on some shit. Like, they were like the North Korea of that time, and they had the resources that current North Korea doesn't have.
Yeah.
As far as like them being all crazy and all like, we're gonna blow shit up. They had the power to do it, and they did it.
Yeah.
Like, they were just blowing shit up, and they were just taking over. Like, they did some shit in China. I know that. And there's a lot of movies that deal with that. Another movie that deals with that is obviously Ip Man. Go watch Ip Man. It's an incredible movie starring Donnie Yen. But it's crazy because it's crazy seeing obviously Japan now, current Japan, being so pacifist and stuff, and obviously experiencing issues with North Korea as well, current issues because they're literally experiencing threats from North Korea. But it's crazy how time is such an indicator of different types of atrocities that go unnoticed in different parts of the world that we might not know because it doesn't get the attention that other atrocities get. Not measuring necessarily,
right,
but bringing the perspective and the story. I think stories are so important, and that's what movies are essentially, is they're stories, and bringing the stories and bringing those perspectives to the light so that a large group of audience can be aware. Awareness is so important, and that's what movies can do, and that's what these type of movies do. Anything else on Empire of the Sun?
No, I mean, this is a fantastic movie. This goes probably as one of the most underwatched Spielberg movies, I think, and we're trying to avoid spoilers for some of these early ones because we really want to make sure if you fellow listeners or viewers haven't checked these films out, The Color Purple, Empire of the Sun, a few of the others that we're going to talk about, please check those out because they're fantastic films and they're historically important for a lot of reasons, and Spielberg being at the center of that is really important. Really interesting.
The next movie he did was a movie called Always, which is obviously RB39's favorite movie.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I haven't seen this one. Was this?
Okay, so it's more of a fiction movie. Full disclosure, we haven't seen Always. This might be a fantastic movie. It might be an amazing movie. But it's on our list in order of Spielberg movies because we're going obviously in order of release. And Always didn't reach our other list, so it is now reaching this list. And with Always, we will always watch Always.
Always watch Always. People.
It's more of like a fictional tale about an airplane and a
like
deceased person and a
yeah.
ghost. So
it
obviously,
sounds like a Spielberg movie.
It's not the kind of Spielberg movie we're talking about on this podcast, however.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to his next movie on our list, which is
Amistad. Okay. This is a movie that is, again, another one to do about slavery. Matthew McConaughey's in it. Damien Hanju is in it. A really great cast. It's really about the persecution of the slave trade that was happening back in the 19th century, or 18th century. Not sure exactly when it's set. Morgan Freeman is in this. It's an incredible cast. It's essentially the courtroom fight and the battle for like the slavery prosecution like process that was happening back during that time.
came out 1997.
1997. Okay, so this is same year as Jurassic Park 2. Same year as Jurassic Park 2. Another year where he flips, where he does both.
This movie has some pretty hardcore, like, emotional stuff too.
Oh, definitely.
It has some scenes that are still, like, hard to watch, and incredible performances, but still hard to watch. Like the scene when they're like throwing water and those guys are like basically naked, and it's like,
those are the conditions.
Hardcore, dude.
Those are the conditions of a lot of the slave trade boats. Like pack as many Africans in as possible into these like tiny spaces to save as much resources as possible. There's horrible conditions, terrible. People say it smelled like they're in hell, like down there. Just
man, it must smell like death down there.
Yeah, literally, people were dying on these boats.
Yeah,
nothing to eat, nowhere to sleep. Like all literally stacked up on each other. So it's like and this movie kind of portrays that in kind of a really sensitive way. I think this is probably I kind of said before that Empire of the Sun is probably his most underwatched. This one's really underwatched too, because a lot of times we mention this movie in conversations with people, they're not really going out and looking for this. But I think this came out during a time where Spielberg was very interested in exploring the idea of the past coming back to haunt us. Right. This must have came out after Schindler's List. Schindler's List came out in 93 or
did we skip Schindler's List?
We might have skipped Schindler's List.
Oh, we totally skipped Schindler's List.
Yeah,
it's okay. We'll go back.
We'll come back to Schindler's List. Yeah,
sorry guys.
Yeah. No, we're good.
Freestyling.
Yeah. But Amistad, another one we're continuing
following Schindler's List is very relevant to this conversation.
Right. Well, I mean, it's
in the sense of like oppression and
exactly, and
systematic elimination.
Exactly, and kind of carrying off the back of The Color Purple, what they're doing thematically, with the idea of their past coming to haunt them. This is the idea of the past being the present, and how these prosecutions against humanity has essentially put a lot of these people in very compromising positions. And I don't know, it's a very deep film. Again, I recommend checking it out. I don't want to give away too many plot details again, of course, but I'd say that it's probably one you'd only really want to watch once, because it's so heart-wrenching and so deep and in thought in what it's doing. But yeah.
I might be wrong in this, but I feel like this might have given birth. He might have been known for other stuff before this, but it might have given birth to a guy who I think is very underrated and who kind of he hasn't done anything great in a while. But I forget. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but his name is Digimon.
Yeah, Damon Hanzu.
Digimon Hanzu.
Hanzu. Yeah.
That guy's incredible.
Yeah.
That guy's freaking incredible.
Yeah.
He's so good, and he's so good in freaking Gladiator. He's in Gladiator in a supporting role, and he's badass in Gladiator, and he literally kills it in Gladiator. Like, he kills me every time I see that movie. But he's a great actor, man, and he's someone who is he's what is he again? He's not where's he from?
Oh, I'm not sure. Yeah.
He's a freaking
he's African something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But he's phenomenal. He's a phenomenal actor, and he's Steven Spielberg gave him a lot to do in this movie.
Oh, definitely. And I think again, when particularly talking about movies that deal with race and deal with the complications associated with race, this one kind of does like a mini exploration within, you know what I mean? There's so many great scenes in this movie, but I think some of the most powerful material is coming in those testimonies and those confessions, and where you see the whole courtroom just there. I don't know. Again, check this movie out. This is a film that I highly recommend as well, because like we're mentioning before and again, the idea of systematic religion coming to the eyes of the people, the individuals, the characters. That's something that's prosecuted these people to living the lifestyles that they're living, and how hate can really fester into. And again, there's another movie we talked about in last week's show. Not really a central bad guy. It's more of the idea of the bad guy. You know what I mean? The idea of racism, the idea of misappropriation and mistreatment and all this
Slavery.
stuff. So slavery, exactly.
I mean, dude, it really is like, it's one of those historical references, because obviously this is a historical episode on Steven Spielberg, but it's one of those things where one critic said it best. Steven Spielberg is able to give you the history that you can't see, that you can't experience, that you can't feel in the books. In the books, you can read about it, you can see, you can, think like how awful this must be. But seeing it on film and seeing it in experience, it really puts the historical perspective to light. And it really gives you that like visceral, emotional journey of how humanity went so low, the deprivation of humanity went so low to the points of the pits of hell to bring something like slavery to the light, and to commit something like slavery is an absolutely important part of history. And movies like this are able to tell you about that reference in a very powerful way by showing you. And making you experience it. And it's important because obviously, everyone should know about it, and everyone does know about it. But it's important because it is, like you said, something that went through, like, dude, even after, like, freaking Lincoln. And you went after all this stuff and went through hundreds of years of systematic oppression in different ways. People found different ways to oppress black people. All the way, I mean, dude, leading up to the 60s and the help and all this stuff. And it's crazy, and it's very important, and I feel like Spielberg was able to bring that out in this film. Let's go back to Schindler's List. Obviously, before Amistad. Sorry about missing that, guys. Came out in 1983, which, funny enough, is the same year as Jurassic Park. And obviously, this is one of the most incredibly... I honestly think, like, it's one of the most... It's gonna go down in history as one of the most powerful films ever made. Like it's that crazy. Like it's that emotionally moving. It's that emotionally powerful. It's that incredibly artistic. It's that incredibly, like I said before, historical perspective coming to life and showing you this era, which wasn't that long ago, how depraved and how awful humanity can be in this, area of the world, which is obviously
the harsh realities of the Holocaust.
And the Nazis and people, the systematic killing and the systematic elimination of a group of people. Like that's just incredibly, disgusting. So Schindler's List is able to dive into those things and give you, a different perspective and give you a story that took place that is absolutely incredible and that a lot of people should listen to. It's based on a book, I believe, by I forget the author, but it stars Liam Neeson, who is a phenomenal actor.
Oscar Schindler.
That's Oscar Schindler, and he actually got an Oscar nomination for this movie too. I don't think he won, but I think he got a nomination. Obviously, this movie got a ton of nominations. But let's start there, because let's start with Liam Neeson's character, obviously, and Liam Neeson's performance. Oscar Schindler is a very powerful businessman and all that, but Liam Neeson brings so much depth and so much heart and so much character. I don't know. He has such a big presence on screen, obviously, because he's a big guy, but he's a very powerful actor, and he gives a lot into this performance, and Steven is able to get that out of him. And really, there's an interesting point in that doc when Steven Spielberg's, when Liam Neeson says that he felt like a puppet at one point because Steven was directing every hand movement and every twitch and even the way he smoked, and he felt like, man, dude, you don't even know, I'm trying to smoke how to smoke, and you're telling me to smoke a different way. And it's like he felt like a puppet, and he was told that let Steven do what he do. Steven is a true artist, that he's able to take every minute motion and every minute gesture and make that a very specific thing it's like a stroke of the brush in a painting, and that's what Steven is able to do, and that's what he did with Liam Neeson's character. So much so that he got a nomination off of it. But what do you think of his performance in this movie, and the fact that it's basically his POV, but he's able to bring so much heart in him and so much change?
Right. I mean, I think this movie definitely. I mean, it's about Oscar Schindler, right? It's the idea of him being conflicted because obviously he works for the government, he works for the Nazis, and he's forced to give this list of people who to prosecute, who not to prosecute, right? So it's like it's dealing in the fact that once we meet his character, he's already conflicted by the ideology of the Nazis, and it really is one man's strive to try and fight what is happening in the system of Germany, 1930s, 1940s, right? Germany, and how he's just trying to save his people. He's just trying to hold on to who he has. But at the end of the day, he can only save so many, right? And he comes to this revelation when the movie is obviously shot and starking black and white,
which is we've talked about black and white before with the Alexander Payne episode, but black and white is a very bold choice. Every time you do a movie that's black and white, it's like you better do something good,
right,
because that's hard to do, man.
Yeah, and he comes across it comes across really strongly because it's a black and white situation, frankly, right? It's good, like this is. It's almost as straightforward as it goes. Nazis good. I mean, Nazis bad. Not Nazis good. No, Nazis bad. Oscar Schindler, one of the good guys, right? Like not, trying to stand up against the system and
trying to not lose his humanity.
Right. Exactly.
Trying to not lose himself. Right. Mm-hmm. What do you would you rather give up what's the point that you're able to not be a human anymore? Mm-hmm. And that's what the Nazis were able to do. They reached a point where they were able to be inhuman, to be not human, to be something that clearly they let go of ever being a human person with what they were doing. Was Oscar willing to go that far and not be human? And he's like, no, I can't do that. I gotta help, dude. I can't do this. Yeah. I can't just turn a blind eye.
Right, and it's all highlighted in that beautiful moment, of course, with the girl in the red, and red coat.
The red when everything else is in black and white, which is obviously very powerful. Right. Visually, just visually, it's absolutely, that scene is incredible.
Right, and it really gives you the understanding of what's at stake here, And she, with red being such a broad color that represents blood, death, tragedy, evil. But putting that little girl in that, it's like, this is what she's experiencing. This is what she is seeing. And then for Oscar Schindler seeing that kind of being the big pivotal turning point. If I'm being honest, man, I haven't watched this movie in a little bit, only because it's so emotionally draining. So was it 3 hours and 11 minutes long?
It's a long movie.
So it's a lot to get through, but I mean, frankly, the themes of this movie, we talked about Amistad already, but it carries through a lot of the legacy that Steven Spielberg is trying to portray, at least in his historical movies, right? He's trying to tell the audience, like, this was a major issue. This was something that he was affected by personally. His grandparents were Holocaust survivors. So, for him, this was not just a story about, the individual, is a story about the tragedy in general. So
it's a story about the people, and this was also about his people and what he experienced and what his family experienced, and the burden that's carried with the Jewish people experiencing such a horrible atrocity, which is the Holocaust.
Right.
And it's also it also deals with the human level and human expression and the idea of love and the idea of mercy and the idea of compassion, and how compassion can be the most powerful thing, and how many people might see compassion as weakness, especially during a time of war, and yet compassion can save a generation of people, right? Because he saved a lot of people. Like, there's a lot of people that are not dead. And also, speaking of that little girl in the red coat, seeing her body dumped with the rest of the bodies as they're being burned, dude, that's a striking image. Like, that right there in itself is able to just destroy anyone watching this movie. Is seeing, the Nazis carrying her in a wheelbarrow, and you see the red coat, knowing that it was that girl. So you have a very strong visual cue, knowing it was her, and seeing her dumped with the rest of the bodies, with everyone else, as if it's like it doesn't. The Nazis didn't care how old you were. They didn't care if you were a 2-year-old or 3-year-old. They were still going to kill you just like they killed your whole family. They really were on a mission, a very disturbed mission.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because this movie obviously ends with the final shot of everyone coming to the graves and of Oscar Schindler, and it's showing you actual people who were affected by this specific moment in history, to show you the historical relevance of what went down is within itself going to win you a lot of awards. But it's also going to stick with you as a very powerful film, and as a film that can be regarded as a, not just in the history of history, but in the history of movies, as one of the most striking, powerful movies of all time.
And I think it really gets the idea of how, you know, at the end of the day, these big tragedies and mass genocides really only come to the hands of the people, of a couple people who either help the situation or don't help, or actually causing the situation. Really just men in a business room, like smoking cigarettes and talking to each other. And that's how these massive things go down. And it's so sad and it's so sickening when you're actually watching this in this movie. And you come to understanding, and it really is. I mean, there's that quote by Stanley Kubrick where he's like, kill one is a tragedy, kill a million is a statistic. You know what I mean? So it's like, that really is what it comes down to, especially with the Nazis and the Holocaust. And again, the fact that Spielberg was able, I mean, he had a really tough time making this movie because he just connected. I mean, this is his family, this is his legacy, this is his history that's on the line here. And but the fact that he was able to carry that with so much grace and respect, and he was being so specific. Again, that's why he was being so specific with actors like Liam Neeson or Ralph Fiennes or whatever, because he really wants to evoke the emotional response that they're trying to go for here. So, and of course, it paid off. The movie won Best Picture, Best Director, first Best Director win for Spielberg after like 4 nominations, or three or 4 nominations. But yeah, this is the first win of his out of that, and again, it just goes to show how impactful this movie was in the long run.
Yeah. Shout out to Ralph Fiennes as well for playing an evil Nazi guy.
Yeah.
Still a great actor. I consider him to be a great actor as well. Schindler's List, man, it's definitely one of those movies that is a tough one, and it's influenced a lot of his other films as well. Which we're going to jump to right now, which is another powerful movie that a lot of people regard as one of the most powerful movies, and that's Saving Private Ryan. Saving Private Ryan, which showed you the one of the first movies. Well, I mean, it's debatable. There's a lot of war movies that show you this, but one of the most visceral, gritty, as if puts you right there kind of movie with the atrocities of war and the atrocities that can go into war, and how war can seem so how can I say, quick and simple. Shoot the bad guy, shoot him before he shoots you. Yeah. But it's so much more than that.
It's all about instinct, like and the heat of the moment.
And it's one of those things too, where as far as like you hear about a moment, and you hear about a day, or you hear about stories of wars or battles, and like you said, it's like a statistic. It's like a history book. It's like something you just like you find out. It's like, oh, that's crazy. And you don't realize, like, no, like lots of people died in very harsh ways and very disturbing ways, and dying in any kind of way is awful, but dying in this way specifically and in this moment specifically is incredible, especially knowing that half those soldiers were kids. They were like 20 years old, man. They were like your age, and they were getting like their guts ripped out. It's crazy. It's absolutely, it's one of those movies that shows you that in a very realistic way. And it's obviously a testament to Steven Spielberg's ability to take different types of filmmaking into account and to really put that into each and every one of his movies, but put that into specifically this movie. And it's the sound design in this movie, showing you the bullets, showing you the piercing of the bullets, whether it be piercing in the water, piercing in the skin, or hitting and ricocheting off stuff and coming past you. And it just, dude, feeling that must be insane. Like, it's insane of that. What do you feel about this movie, obviously, on a this is another one of Spielberg's attempts to really put you into history.
Yeah, this is probably one of the bigger movies that he's done. The whole opening 10 minutes of as they're raiding the beach or trying to overcome the beach is like, it's powerful filmmaking, and that could be his own like short film in itself, right? I mean, the way that movie opens, and you know, is of course it's his first collaboration with Tom Hanks. So Tom Hanks is in this, and you get a real sense of the camaraderie between the crew that he ultimately bands together to save Private Ryan. And but you're right, it's about the visceralism of war, right? And it's so visceral the way he directs his movie, you know, with dropping the frame count when you know he's shaken, or the sound design like you mentioned, the way the camera moves, the way the camera functions, the way how sometimes it will actually cut to Tom Hanks's POV as he's running up the beach, and like it's a very subtle thing. It's hard to notice, but it will actually cut to his POV. So those moments like that are what really makes it, you're put into the heart of this character, and as an extension, you know, this guy puts his heart into his team, to his people, weirdly enough including Vin Diesel. But he's
great in this movie, man.
He is great. Yeah, this was the first, wasn't this like Vin Diesel's like first major?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
shout out to Vin Diesel.
Yeah, so
still making that money.
Yeah, Vin Diesel. Yeah, the Fast and Furious, man.
Making so much money in that movie.
Big money. But I just love seeing him in this, and the same with everybody. Paul Giamatti, the slimy guy from Avatar. I can't remember his name. Giovanni. I don't know. I can't remember his name. But a lot of great actors in this movie. You know, to say the least. And of course, do we want to spoil this one? I mean, this one's more culturally like out there.
A lot of people have seen it. If you feel like it adds to the conversation, I'm okay with it.
Well, it's just the fact. I mean, you know, it's the fact that they're all banding together to find Private Ryan, right? Who is the last person in his family to, you know, all of his brothers had died. They're trying to get one back to the family. You know what I mean? So, you know, and in the end, we realize that is Matt Damon, right? So when Matt Damon, you know, they spend the whole movie trying to find him, and he's like, I don't want to go anywhere. Are you kidding me? Like, and they basically have to drag him back and take him back home, and as a result, we end up losing a lot of the cast and the crew that we have become, the cast and the team that we have become familiar with along the way, including you know, our central character. So it's really the story of sacrificing lives and multiple lives just for the sake of one. You know what I mean? And that's ultimately what the heroism of war is: being able to sacrifice yourself for somebody else. And I think that's what is really important and really groundbreaking about this movie, is that it's able to capture that feel. And you know, there's stories of people who watched this World War II veterans watching this movie and having like literally PTSD episodes in the theater.
I heard about that too.
Because it's just so visceral and powerful, and it's so relatable to the struggle these guys are having. So again, I think this is a masterpiece.
It is
Spielberg's filmography.
It's a masterpiece in filmmaking.
Yeah.
It's another one of those movies too that he felt like he needed to have an ending that is like a dedication and like an honor of the veterans of World War II. And it's also another personal film of his too, because he heard stories from his dad who had some, you know, encounters in war and stuff during that time in World War II. And it's crazy because it was a period of time that, as a kid growing up, like we talked about in the last week's episode, that he knows so much about because he heard so many stories about it, and he was obviously fascinated with it because it's as a kid you grow up with these incredible, you know, stories of heroic moments that people are going through. So it's absolutely on a personal level for Steven, another, you know, personally. You know, another personal movie that he feels like he can put a stamp on it, and a dedication for the veterans that went through that horrific thing. I mean, obviously, shout out to all the veterans who go through war and the atrocities of war. I think that's what it is too, because when you learn as a kid growing up, obviously I grew up in Texas and stuff, and growing up in that, you see the immediate reverence towards veterans, and you. As a kid, you're just kind of like, oh, cool, and you just do what your parents tell you. But when it is one of these are the kind of movies that kind of show you why we give so much to veterans in the sense of like Veterans Day and all this and remember and all this stuff and honor and it's because of like, dude, if you can go through this shit, like, bro, like you deserve all the awards. You deserve all the attention and all the freaking praise and honor that veterans get and should get because of this kind of stuff. It really is like it's the concept of giving your life to war, where when you go to war, you're kind of signing your death sentence, and you're kind of signing your life away, not just obviously on a very much like physical level as far as literally dying, but also on an emotional level, on a mental level, on a every single aspect of your life. You're breaking it down to the point of what it takes to get someone to physically take someone else's life for his country, and that's just crazy. That's just crazy. And it's one of those movies that deals with that so well because they're able to show you, like, this is what they go through. And you're like, well, damn. Another movie that did that last year was Hacksaw Ridge, showing you the freaking craziness of that time period with a different type of war, obviously. Different area of war, specifically.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it's like, well, damn, like, if y'all did this shit, then, you know, my honor to you, and it should be.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Now, a lot of the criticism for this movie comes in the fact that it opens with the pan in on the eyes, making you think that's Tom Hanks, and in the end you realize it's Matt Damon's character. Do you feel a certain type of way about that?
I don't know. No, I think that's fine. I don't know why that would get criticism. I mean, I get why it would get criticism, but for me, no, I think that works. I think that's a very purposeful thing that Steven put in there, and I think it works. I think it does. Any last word on Saving Private Ryan?
No, I mean this is one of my favorite Spielberg movies. In terms of that particular criticism, I mean, I get it. In terms of the language of film, the way we interpret film and relationship between cuts, of course you're gonna make that interpretation. But I mean, it is what it is. I don't think that's like a detractor from the movie for any extent. But I think there's so many great sequences in here, like the sniper scene. That they have with yeah, that was deep.
I forget the actor's name, but yeah.
But again, a lot of great moments in this movie. I think is just fantastic.
Absolutely. Let's move on to Catch Me If You Can, which is the next movie of his. That's another, period piece. Another Hanks movie, Tom Hanks movie.
Tom Hanks.
Yeah, this one's obviously a different tone than
the other
Saving Private Schindler's List. But this is another movie that a lot of people freaking love this movie, man. Yeah. And I want to ask you, what do you feel on the themes of this movie specifically, and also just on a Steven Spielberg level?
Well, first off, this is probably, in talking Spielberg's overall filmography, probably like top 5 material for me, right? On the fact that, it manages a level of satirism while also a level of cynicism, but still being the optimistic, bright-eyed Steven Spielberg movie that we've come to expect, right? So it has Leonardo DiCaprio, Tom Hanks, Christopher Walken, so many great performances in this movie, man. And I think
Tom Hanks kills it specifically, but obviously Leo does too. But Tom Hanks in this movie, man, he brings so much. Like, to me, this is Tom Hanks, being Tom Hanks, as far as like. Every time people talk about him as being one of the great actors, this is an example of it.
Right.
This is crazy how good he is in this. Little moments that he gives you that are so good. So good. But keep going.
No, I mean, I just think, in terms of the way the characters are handled, I mean, you really do get... it centers around Frank Abagnale, based on the true story of a dude who, who basically became like a pilot, a doctor, and... what else, like a banker or whatever, basically just all within the span of like being a kid, right? And being super like smart. So he ripped off millions and millions of dollars off people by forging checks. And it really I think this movie really highlights how like flawed the banking system was and currently is, that allows somebody to be so easily it was like easily manipulate the system and get all his money through just cashing fake checks. And he was able to copy that, and then he eventually works for an airline so he could start making the rounds and traveling across the country and become a pilot just to look cool. I think that's what also was cool about this movie too, is a very snarky look at like 1960s culture, like how people were just obsessed over like the Pan Am pilots, and how like he was inspired by like James Bond to buy like the little car and the tuxedo, like all these like great like 60s references of just the mind state that people were in during that time was just really fun.
It reminds me of I'm not sure exactly where Shape of Water took time, but remember that scene in Shape of Water, like buying the Cadillac, and being teal, and that's part of the culture back then, was like looking cool.
Right,
it was part of the culture for sure. Yeah, this movie it shows the ability of one guy to able to con so many people, and what it takes when your life is one continuous lie on top of a lie on top of another lie on top of another lie, and where that kind of spirals down to. It's absolutely crazy, the amount of stuff, like you just said before, what he was able to accomplish. But yeah, man, I mean, this movie what do you feel like thematically it deals with the most as far as themes running through it? Do you feel like it's the identity thing that Leo's going through?
His identity, like misplaced identity. Where does identity lie? And again, this is another one we talked about in last week with the Spielberg father-son relationship, right? Especially with Christopher Walken. I think this was probably the most reflective of Spielberg's actually interaction, because in Spielberg's real life, he had his mother and father were married, and then they got divorced, and he always fell on the side of his dad and in real life he had a resentment against his father for divorcing his mother, but not knowing that the mother was actually the one who set up the divorce. And this movie is kind of the flip the opposite way. Like he's always on his father's side because he's hoping that his father could win his mother back. But at the end of the day, he realizes, oh, his dad's really a shitty husband. So that's why she left him. But it's so much deep and that transcends into the external world, right? Because internally, Leo's character Frank, he's dealing with the trauma of not knowing where to place blame for his parents' divorce. But he externalizes that conflict by just like you said, changing identities, changing locations, showing off with money. And that's also a thing, like his dad was very slick with money, very cool with the way he handled his financial problems. So Frank's solution to managing that was like literally robbing banks. And I think thematically, I mean, this movie, it kind of speaks, I mentioned the flawed banking system, but it kind of speaks highly to the fact that, these banks got so much money, man. Like, is it really wrong to be stealing from these people if you're just making a living on your own like that? And of course, it's against the law, and that's what Tom Hanks's character. But even there's that whole conversation of like, is this real? Like, he's forging checks, and I don't know. It's interesting the way they approach that, and the way that they're able to give the circumstantial, ideological like standpoint of Frank, where printing checks is. He's printing checks to make his own living, but he's also just a young kid. He's lost, and he really wants somebody to connect to. That's why he's connecting to the Tom Hanks, even though he's the person that's investigating him. So,
and it's also like the level of a crime and what time and punishment means, and what all that kind of stuff means as far as
white collar crime versus blue collar crime.
It's also the idea of placement of skills, right? Where it's like one smart kid can do, if you can do that much on your own against the law, how much can you do for the law?
Yeah.
Working for placement of skill. Like, where do you place a certain level of people's skills and people's intellect if you can somehow change the course of it and move it in a different direction, and kind of like use your skills for a good type of thing. It also deals with that, obviously towards the end of the movie too. It's interesting. It's interesting as far as like what you can do when you have the ability to do so much, and when you can do so much, you have a responsibility to not just fend for yourself, but fend for others. I don't know. I don't know if that you feel that as well.
Yeah, it's like a Robin Hood kind of mentality is coming through, and of course, Amy Adams is in this movie as well. She plays like Frank's girlfriend. And there's some interesting stuff. He also becomes a lawyer, which is like just shows you how a fucking like a 20-year-old kid could just read a couple books and study to become a lawyer in like 3 months, right? So it's just funny how again all of these elements are just stacking on top of each other. Of how, like you said, he has the skill, he has the intelligence. But what happens when he takes that out and starts using that, for and working for the people that are hunting him down, the FBI. Because obviously they can figure out who he was. It took like a really sharp investigator trying to piece that together. But without Tom Hanks, nobody would have known he was ripping off checks. So it's interesting how that.
Yeah, it's also kind of like a cool little. I mean, obviously not as deep, but it's still like a cool little look into that era of the FBI, right?
Yeah.
Because the FBI back then was like, just kind of starting out,
Yeah.
and it really was obsessed with, just like they say, Federal Bureau of Investigation, because it's all about investigating. It's all about that kind of stuff. So
Right,
it's a very
right.
interesting movie. It did get a lot of Academy Award nominations, right? I think it did.
This came out the same year as Minority Report. I know that. And I mean, the fact that it's based on a real life story is what's most incredible about this, right? The fact that all of this really happened, and it opens, and again, kind of riffing off the 70s or the 60s culture, opens with like that game show, right? Like, and the whole game show, the point of that is the question of identity and the compatibility. So. It's fascinating in that way.
Absolutely. Let's jump over to Munich.
Well, the Terminal, we're skipping over.
Oh, we did?
Over, yeah.
Damn it, man. I always skip movies.
We can skip the Terminal. Let's be honest.
No, we can't.
It's not the greatest movie Spielberg has made. This is one with Tom Hanks. He plays like I don't know if it's Russian or do they even really say the country?
They do. I forget though. Yeah. I totally forget. Yeah, this movie. I'm curious. Why don't you like it?
I mean, it's just silly. It's silly. The whole point of the movie is this guy is stuck in an airport because his foreign visas got like trippy or whatever.
But it's still like a little. I mean, it's not the greatest think piece on immigration, but it's still like.
Yeah, it's a thing. Exactly, it's a think piece on immigration, and
but it's a think piece on immigration.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it touches on the ideas of post 9/11. Like airport, like not airport activities, but it kind of touches on why like the idea of the other being in the American airport and what is he doing there? Why is he like just hanging out there? And they have that whole big interrogation scene near the end where right there, yeah. So again, like they're trying to they just thinking this dude's like a wacko trying to like. Take it out. But he is a wacko, but he's just weird. You know what I mean? Like, he's a very weird cat. But he's trying to get to back to his country. He can't get back. The visas have been. What are your thoughts on this movie, though?
I think it's all right. I don't think it's as bad as you're saying.
It's not bad.
I don't think it's the worst movie, like RB3 just said.
No, it's not the worst. No.
RB, I'm just destroying you, dude. I'm just messing with you, man. No, I think it's an interesting thing, right? Because we dealt this year with a very not the same thing, obviously, but a very relevant thing as far as banning people from certain countries.
Right.
I mean, dude, the thought of that, like that blew my. When that was taking place, I was kind of pissed, obviously. But that to me is that movie comes in. This movie comes into relevance with that, right? I mean, I think so. I mean, think about
that. I make the connection.
Think about that. The Muslim ban, dude. The fact that you're specifically identifying 7 different countries to be kind of outlawed from coming into this country just because they're from that country. I mean, that's the textbook definition of racism, if I've ever heard it, right? I mean, telling you can't come here only because you're from a certain area, damn. I mean, that's relevant within itself. So when it comes to that, that's very important in the movie too.
Right.
But it's interesting because all of Spielberg's movies, well, not all of them, but a lot of them deal with kind of like the American feel, right? We just talked about Catch Me If You Can, which kind of deals with that too. But it deals with like the American feel, the American perspective, whether it be the sacrifice in Saving Private Ryan or the craziness of Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Catch Me If You Can, but kind of like what is America and what is its potential versus its potential to commit good, to commit evil, to extend a helping hand or to reject people from certain areas, because that's powerful even within itself, right?
Right.
And what's the idea of the American dream, the idea of the American lifestyle, and the idea of America being a different kind of country, not just with its potential and opportunities, but with its ideology and its symbolism as far as what it represents for
Right.
people in different parts of the world. Because for people in different parts of the world, it represents an opportunity, and it represents an ideology and a symbol of success. Dude, as someone who spent a lot of time in Mexico, obviously, and a lot of people know, I lived my life in border towns, and I lived my life across the border, one way across the border, the other way in Texas for a long time, and in Arizona too. But it's one of those things where it really is, it's stark, dude. It really is one of those things where Mexicans and other people, and they see it as like, damn, I just have to get there. Have to. And even when I spent time in Colombia, it's funny when I tell people, and obviously in Spanish because I speak Spanish, but telling them I'm from America and kind of getting their reaction, being like, oh, like really, that's crazy. And it's like, obviously most of the kids I told, and they were kids, but they were kids, and they would kind of have an idea of foreign kids having an idea of what America is. But for those reasons, I think, obviously the movie doesn't get that deep, but for those reasons, I think the movie can be relevant and can be interesting in what it is saying.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. It has some cool moments. I mean, that moment when he's coming through is kind of cool.
Yeah.
You know which moment I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
When he actually gets through and all that. But it's not the biggest standout Spielberg film.
Right. Zoe Saldana's in this too, right?
I think so. Yeah. She totally is.
Yeah. I thought she was funny in this, and I think the supporting cast was pretty funny, and
Stanley Tucci.
Yeah, Stanley Tucci. Yeah.
I love Stanley Tucci, bro. Stanley Tucci's my homie.
Yeah.
Freaking what's his freaking name? Caesar Flickerman.
Oh yeah,
Caesar. Caesar Flickerman. I freaking love that guy. That's my dream, bro. I'm not gonna be evil like Caesar Flickerman, because he turns out he's evil, but one of these days I'm gonna be the Caesar Flickerman of movie podcasting.
There we go.
But I love Stanley Tucci.
No, he's good in this. I think. I don't know. I think essentially when I saw this movie, and I saw this like actually it's one of those movies that like my teacher just put on like when the sub was on. Sub was substituting or whatever. My history teacher. But it was. I think it's a fine movie. I just always get thrown off by the Tom Hanks accent. You know what I mean? That's a little.
Don't get me started, dude. I was gonna ask you, but you jumped the gun.
Yeah.
Pro Tom Hanks, playing this character from this country accent, or anti? What do you think?
I mean,
I think it's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's a crazy accent.
Yeah,
like, it is next level.
Yeah,
like crazy.
And he probably nailed it, but for our ears, it doesn't sound like he nailed it.
Yeah. So
because it almost sounds like this sounds a little crazy.
I thought it was like an SNL sketch, like almost. You know? What
Yeah,
I mean? Like,
I'm with you. I'm 100% with you.
So I don't know what country he's supposed to be representing, but. It's just crazy that just always throws me out of the movie just a little bit. So.
I forget. Is it? No, it's not Lebanon. Whatever. Let's jump over to Munich. Munich is one of those movies that it's another gritty movie, and it's another movie that actually took place because it happened in the Munich Olympics, and it's a movie that deals with a very delicate topic, a very complex topic, and that's the topic of the Middle East and the tensions and the craziness going on in the Middle East that's been going on for freaking forever, right?
Dwelling conflict that just keeps boiling and boiling.
It's incredible. It's incredible for how far back this goes and how this deals with, like, just reading up on it and really studying up on it this year, because I tried to as much as I can, is absolutely fascinating. And hearing people's perspective from it on a personal level, because there's a lot of Middle Eastern people in LA, and there's a lot of Jewish people in LA, and there's a lot of like different perspectives and different. I've met a lot of Palestinians this year, which kind of gave me a different perspective, and I met a lot of people from different areas. So it's crazy. It's just crazy because no matter what, there's no side. There really isn't a side.
Yeah.
But this is something that actually took place in the Munich Olympics. I forget what year it is. It could be in the 80s or 70s.
Yeah, 1980,
six?
yeah, something like that.
But anyways, it actually took place. It starts Eric Bana. Is
Yeah,
that his
Eric
name?
Bana, yeah.
Eric Bana, who obviously we all know from Troy,
Mm-hmm.
greatest movie ever. No, I'm just,
Yeah,
it's a good movie though.
The Incredible, or The Hulk, or
Oh.
not, just Hulk.
Hulk,
Yeah.
Ang Lee's Hulk. I still know him from Troy, playing Hector, as everyone knows. But anyways, it stars Eric Bana, and he's a great actor, man. Eric Bana's underrated. He's dope. But yeah, this movie has a very interesting feel because it has that feel of like interlaced within historical, like, you know, this actually took place kind of thing. That feeling of like the media covering it in a very like powerful way, because
Yeah.
it's a time where media had a heavy hand.
Yeah, I was gonna
And-
say that the incorporation of the media in this movie is probably the biggest thing to take away from it, because it's like how the media is choosing to cover these attacks, and how under the surface you see Eric Bana's character kind of dealing with it on a more personal level, like trying to overcome overcome his beliefs and fight for what he believes in, but meanwhile the outside world, the media, is just seeing it from the broader scope and broad perspective, and how his fight and his plight goes largely like pretty much unnoticed, right? I mean, so it's fascinating how speaking on the media, how inhuman almost that aspect of this movie seems as compared to the very human stuff that's happening with Eric Bana. Of course, we have other cast members, Daniel Craig,
dude.
Yeah.
Freaking every time Daniel Craig comes up on this podcast, we talked about him in Matthew Vaughn, but I freaking love Daniel Craig, man. Everything that he's in, I freaking love him. But yeah, he's great in this movie too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think they're going for something very specific, and in terms of relating this to terrorist attacks back during that time, to the modern stuff that we're seeing now, especially in 2001. This movie came out in 2005, same year as War of the Worlds. Another year, Spielberg.
Think about
flipping it back.
it. Think about it this time too. Like, it's technically not the same year, but The Post and Ready Player One. They're coming out within the span of 2 months or 3 months.
Well, literally, Spielberg shot Ready Player One and was editing, and then he was like, "Oh fuck, I need to make The Post," and then just made it, and then like it's coming out. Like,
It's crazy, dude.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, it definitely is one of those things that Spielberg can handle both types of movies.
Right.
But what does this rank for you as far as like Spielberg films and as far as like the kind of films that he does? Because I think this movie's kind of underrated. I don't know what you feel about it.
Yeah, it's pretty underrated. I think that, it doesn't. It's a different kind of energy than most other Spielberg movies, right? It's as much about the human emotion as it is about the experience, right? The tension, the suspense that's behind these tragedies and what's happening. So it's a little more interlaced with like not as many big character moments and big emotional beats. It's also because it's based on the real life circumstances that a lot of people don't want to talk about, frankly. So a lot of people kind of dodge the discussion around this movie that they're kind of setting forth.
I want to talk a little bit about the idea of a man on a mission.
Right.
Because that's kind of what the running theme in this movie is, the idea of a man obsessed with a mission.
It's parallel themes. Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like coming from a perspective of two different people or two different ideologies or two different missions. And the idea of like you're just obsessed with accomplishing something, and you're the idea of like masculinity specifically too, and I know it doesn't say it in the movie, but I'm taking it away from it,
Right.
and I'm saying like the idea of a man who's gonna accomplish something that's like powerful and for my people or for my good or for my country, no matter what it is. And the idea that you get from the perspectives in this movie is very powerful, because that's what we see now. Is we see a lot of people who take on missions and that become atrocities and that become terrorist acts and that become mass shootings and that become horrific things that take place because of one man's thought process and one man's obsession
and his belief
with completing a mission, whether it comes from religious belief or whether it comes from whatever ideological feelings towards a group of people. It's incredibly powerful. The type of devastation that one person can cause and the type of change that one person can cause if they're willing to go too far, or if
Right.
they're willing to go far enough.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
It's very interesting, and it's very interesting dealing with those things because it's definitely one of those themes in the movie. Another thing I want to talk about with this movie is the setting, and obviously, I'm a guy who a lot of people love the Super Bowl and stuff, and I freaking love the Super Bowl. But I'm one of those guys, and I found out a lot this year. Well, not this year, obviously, but last year, that Americans don't. I'm stretching it, but a lot of people don't care about the Olympics as much as my family does.
Right. No, people don't. Frankly,
People
like,
don't.
Yeah.
My family's obsessed with the Olympics. I grew up in a household that's very Latino and very, like prideful Colombian, prideful Mexican, prideful, like specifically Colombian, because I spent some time in Colombia when the Olympics were going on for a couple different Olympics. But basically, like, for a lot of countries, the idea of the Olympics, and obviously maybe not for the U.S., but the idea of the Olympics is very, very, like, you take it so personally, and it's such a personally, like, that's my freaking country, and he freaking lifted that weight better than everyone else, and you're like, yo, calm down, bro, like it's lifting weights, man.
Yeah.
This isn't like freaking, like, you're not
Life or death.
This isn't life or death, but
yeah.
some countries do, man, and it becomes a very powerfully a financial, a political, very political,
yeah.
Influential campaign type of stuff that other countries pull over the Olympics, and they use that as a message and as branding and as running elections and running things and running ads and running campaigns around the Olympics and around the representing your country in the Olympics. It's a very personal, powerful thing for a lot of countries, and I know obviously it's different for you because you grew up in the U.S., but for me, it's incredible, dude, and it's crazy how this year, a documentary that came out that I've been talking about so much and I've been obsessing over, it's called Icarus. I've talked about it on the schmoes.
Right.
But it talks about kind of Russia's obsession with the Olympics and how they're just like so fucking nationalistic and so crazy that they want to win so much so that they've been, part of a systematic, turnaround of using performance enhancing drugs. But it's a message, and it's a powerful message that these craziness took place during the Olympics, a moment where countries they have an investment with the atmosphere, the global atmosphere of what's going on. What do you think of that setting and that kind of that message within itself of setting it with these Olympics going on at the same time?
Right.
It's crazy.
The whole idea of the Olympics is multiculturalism, right? Uniting as many of these nations as possible and coming together for something extraordinary. So I just think that the way that they handle that in this movie is important because, especially when it comes down to a big attack that happened, in real life during the Munich Olympics, is crucial that it was a point of conversation that everybody who was represented has a hand in this. And I just think it's really funny how, going back to the media coverage of this whole situation, at least the way they portray it in this movie, it's like, yeah, the machine's just gonna keep moving, frankly, at the end of the day. So I don't know, it's really powerful in that respect.
It really is. I recommend people watching this film, whether you like it or not. I think you'll get something out of it. Let's move on to, I believe, War Horse. Am I correct?
Yeah, War Horse.
Well, okay, I did it, guys. I made it. I predicted the next movie that we're talking about, which is my one job. War Horse is a movie, though, that doesn't. It's funny. It's one of those movies that's it's not as, it's great and it's people like it, but it's not as well received as other Spielberg films are. Am I wrong on that?
Well, the horse is the main character.
Yeah,
that's why it's a little tough for general audiences to get behind the idea of a horse being like the man. Of course, Jamie Bell is the guy who is really the central character in this movie. His relationship with the horse.
Is it Jamie Bell?
I think it's Jamie Bell.
Or is it Jeremy Irving?
It might be Jeremy Irving. Yeah. Yeah, that's that guy. I'm looking at Ace's laptop for the audio listeners. Yeah, my mistake. Not Jamie Bell.
That's why I was like, is it Jamie Bell?
Yeah, I might have misinformed people on the last week's episode of that. Then it's my bad. But anyway, it's about him, and he's dealing with like this horse he grew up with and found during World War I, or before World War I, that he grew up with, and now this horse has to go off to war and fight for the war, and You know, it's yeah. I don't know, man. It's a horse.
A movie came out this year. It's a very different movie. Freaking, I forget her name. It's the other Mara, Kate Mara.
Oh, right.
I think it's called Megan Levy's War Dog or something like
Never
that.
heard of it. Oh yeah, you're right. With the Afghanistan and the dog. Yeah.
But I think Perry liked it. I think because I heard that she liked it. But it's one of those movies though that yeah, when it comes to like, you know, the whole like cheese factor, I guess you could say, or corny factor, you might say, as far as like, yeah, but it's a horse though, or like, yeah, I love that dog, but damn, you gonna make a whole movie about it? Shit. But as an animal lover that I am, I don't know if you are, but I'm an animal lover, man. My mom has a pup. And her name is Cora, and she's you've met Cora. She's a beautiful, adorable, wonderful little dog that I adore, and obviously my mom adores her too. But it's crazy because I've felt that deep of an emotional connection with just a little bit of time that I spent with Cora, in a sense of like, man, I might just take a bullet for that damn dog. Like that's how much I love that dog. And seeing a creature that is that innocent suffer just obliterates you. It just destroys you in the sense of like a thought of that might destroy you. It almost like it's an innocent baby or an innocent child that you have to protect. So I get it. I get the point. Like there's a lot of horse lovers out there that there's a whole. Like I didn't grow up with horses, but man, I met a lot of people out here in LA because I did a pilot for a TV show a while back, all about horses. I forget the name of it, but it's something horses, something people loving horses. I did a pilot for it. I ran audio for it, and it was like a 2-day shoot. My buddy got me the gig, and I went out there, and I went out to the freaking fields and farms way out in like, north LA area. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, right.
But there's a ton of like horse culture out there in LA that I didn't even know about, and that people love horses. So I got to spend a lot of time with the horses, and I get it. I get how people obsess over these animals, and people have a very strong connection to it. For them going through anything and correctly riding a horse and teaching a horse and teaching it how to ride and all this stuff that I learned that day because I had no idea. I didn't grow up with horses, but so I get what he's going for with that sense. So I just maybe just not a lot of people connect with that. You're right. A lot of people might not connect with just the POV of a horse.
Oh, let's be real. Is this the Best Picture nominee, man? Is this the Best Picture nominee though?
I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautifully shot.
Yeah.
It's incredibly shot. Cinematography is badass.
I'd even go as far as to say it's probably the best looking Steven Spielberg movie.
It's one of them. It's definitely one of the best looking. Yeah.
It's just, I don't know, man. It's a horse. But it should be also said.
I'm like trying to save this man. I'm trying so hard.
Hey man, listen. I think one thing to add though is it is nice to see a movie. All the movies take place during World War II, whatever. This is the one movie that takes place during World War I, which is just fascinating.
Shout out to the World War I. No, but
what's there to talk about with this movie, man?
No, I talked plenty about it, man. I don't know what you're talking about. No, I feel like it's difficult, and it didn't really connect with people, and I don't think it holds up as well as other Spielberg films as far as like rewatchability factor. It's definitely not one of his most rewatchable films for sure.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Yeah. Shout out to horse lovers and people who love horses. I love my dog Cora. Shout out to Cora. Let's move on. Lincoln, absolutely. Lincoln is a crazy movie because this movie was like reigning in Oscar nominations. Like this movie was like reigning in Oscar noms and getting all those noms and getting one of the greatest performances we'll probably ever see with Daniel Day-Lewis, who is GOAT. I'm telling you, man, this guy is GOAT. I haven't even seen, I haven't even seen Phantom Thread yet.
Yeah.
And yet, seen trailers for Phantom Thread. I'm
like,
damn.
You already know he's securing the nomination at least.
At least the nom, bro. Just based off the trailer. Like, nominated for the trailer of Phantom Thread, Mr. Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah.
It's like, damn, off the trailer, though?
Really? No, seriously.
But Daniel Day-Lewis in this movie's long, though. Damn, it's long.
It's like 2 hours, 30 minutes, something like that, right? Oh, like
I think it feels longer, bro.
Yeah.
I don't know how long it is, but it felt long.
It's damn near black and white.
No, I think it's 3 hours, man. I think this movie is, no, it's 2.5. Damn, it feels like 3 hours. But
so desaturated. Like, I remember watching this in theaters. I was like, damn, is this a black and white movie? Like, it's so desaturated. But it is nice to have a lot of the themes that runs through a lot of Spielberg's thing, right?
Sure.
The one person who's trying to help and rebuild the country. And, this movie was originally, nobody wanted to pick it up. Nobody wanted to finance it because it's like, how sellable is Abraham Lincoln? But they ended up, they're going to take it to HBO to make it a miniseries because the script was that long. I mean, it was a damn near novel that they wrote for a screenplay. Tony Kushner, famous Tony winning writer, wrote the script for this. And, you can kind of tell it's written by a playwright on the fact that it was very stagey.
It's very stagey.
And the way that it's constructed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but, I mean, I think if anything to take away from this movie is the performance, right? The performance of Daniel Day-Lewis. Sally Fields as
JGL.
Yeah.
Shout out to JGL who plays the son, right? Am I right?
Son,
He's JGL.
Yeah.
Okay.
He comes in for, it's really like a couple scenes.
Sure.
But yeah, it's still nice to see him in something, know. Did he collaborate with Spielberg before, or this is the first collaboration with Spielberg?
It might have been, yeah.
Yeah, it's only collaboration with Spielberg, I guess. But he's great in this movie, and so is everybody who surrounds this cast.
Who's I forget his name, but that guy is I think he's dope, and I think he gets this
Tommy
guy.
Lee Jones?
No, David Strahan.
Oh, right.
That guy's dope. I love that guy.
Yeah.
That guy pops up in a lot of like small roles, but he's still like a solid guy.
Right.
I freaking love that guy. But yeah, I mean, it really is like looking back at this movie, like rewatching part of it because it's
a
long.
lot to get to. Yeah.
Rewatching part of it made me feel like, man, the legend of Lincoln is like something that's gonna go down in American history as like, yo, Lincoln's a legend, bro.
Yeah.
Legend. Yeah. And it's crazy because it's obviously an inside look into someone who observes American politics as much as they can, because American politics is American politics. But you and me, who observe American politics, you specifically, it's interesting getting an inside look at old American politics.
Well, and Lincoln was a Republican.
He was very Republican.
And that's, I mean, the way Republicanism now is
it's crazy. It's
opposite,
like a weird shift that it took, right? As far as Republican and Democratic.
Yeah, after Lincoln's assassination and a lot of factors. I'm not going to go into it on this podcast, but a lot of factors end up shifting kind of the political gauge a little bit. But what Lincoln kind of represents is like the old school idea of politics, where like literally the president of the United States will have to go knocking on congressmen's doors to try and swing votes to abolish slavery and the Civil War that was happening. So it was literally, that's hand over fist politics happening right there. So it's really interesting look into all of that. So I think it's fascinating.
It's also too like the craziness it must have been for Lincoln being the president of the U.S. during the Civil War. I mean, the Civil War, man, that's some
It's big.
That thing was crazy. Like when you read about it and you hear about it, as far as like the type of wars that took place during that time and the type
deadliest
of like
war in American history.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like bodies on top of bodies on top of bodies. That's where I believe D.B. Pennywise and I forget the other guy's name from Game of Thrones. The Game of Thrones creators came up with the concept of Battle of the Bastards based on, I think, stories of the Civil War, because they said they read up on stories of it about how the bodies would stack up on each other and how they would keep fighting and kind of like fight on hills of people's bodies and just like that sounds horrifying. It's incredibly horrifying. Yeah. And also the separation and the Confederacy's obsession with keeping slavery so much so that they're willing to go to war for it, right? And it's that,
even though they know they're going to lose. Like, there is no way the South could have won that war. But it's again, and I think this movie utilizes that well. Really, the fight for the Civil War is initiated by slavery, right? What individual people were fighting for were not for or against slavery. They're just fighting for their home pride, right? Like, if you're from the North, there's some people from the North who, frankly, did want slavery still, and there are people from the South who didn't want slavery. But the fact that they still had to fight for what they knew true to their home beliefs and their home culture. So it's just interesting the way that this movie kind of highlights that in a lot of ways. Even with the particular congressmen and interacting with them. So,
and a lot of it too, it shows like. Lincoln is known for being the tall president, the very strong president, the very intelligent president, but also like the theatricality of politics. And obviously we see that on the freaking 10th level with our current president. But how like even back then, being a powerful person able to put in certain amendments into place of the Constitution took some form of theatricality. Like
the monologues that he was doing.
Lincoln had to do some big speeches and some big moments and get emotions out of people from his words and from his speeches. Like reading Lincoln's words is really like when you go back, like in school you had to memorize it, right? But when you go back and read it, it shows like this guy was a freaking poet when it comes to like writing this type of stuff. And that's why he's such a freaking legend too, because of the way he's able to incorporate his ability to reach people on a different level. Is obviously amazing. But
absolutely.
I think this film is great on so many different levels. It's one of the best period pieces as far as like historical accuracy, as far as like, man, this thing really felt like it took place. And it looks like they had kind of a budget for it too, because it looks pretty, I mean, everything looks pretty solid.
Right. I mean, it definitely, I believe they shot it, I don't know exactly what kind of budget they shot it on, but it was like a medium budget they were working for, and Spielberg has so much respect for the material, he will show up to set every day wearing a full suit and tie. Just to, because he respected the material, and he knew, Daniel Day-Lewis is not a dude who's breaking characters.
Apparently he was Lincoln the whole time. Remember?
Yeah. So,
that was like the famous story that he was always Lincoln.
Yeah. So Spielberg had to show respect to the president, frankly enough.
Hey, yo, Lincoln, you want some Cheetos, though? I just imagine him
like a PA.
Sure, young boy. If I had some Cheetos. No, I'm not going to do a Lincoln impression. But basically, Daniel Day-Lewis being Lincoln and transforming into that role, and how it's not even an American actor playing.
And you know what's funny? I remember when the first, not even the trailer, the first image of Lincoln dropped.
Oh yeah.
I was like, oh, this is an Oscar right here. This is an Oscar. Like it was like Entertainment Weekly just did the side profile. I think they eventually end up using that image as the poster, but just the image was like, whoa, that's Lincoln right there. Like, that's
absolutely
pretty dope.
Yeah. This movie is again one of the craziest movies that Steven Spielberg has done, and it got a ton of wins and stuff. Well deserved, of course, and everyone knew about it. So shout out to Daniel Day-Lewis and Lincoln.
Of course, the last is Bridge of Spies.
Bridge of Spies, yeah, because we haven't seen the post yet, unfortunately. Bridge of Spies, man. Bridge of Spies is one of those movies that it's funny because when it came out, a lot of people were like, wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. And I think that's kind of unfair to the movie, because I do feel like it's actually pretty good.
It is pretty good.
And it obviously gave us a lot of cool moments in the movie, and it got Mark Rylance an Oscar. Shout out to Mark Rylance, who a lot of people on this podcast might be like, robbed Sylvester Stallone. Because a lot of people predict this. I predicted Mark Ruffalo.
Oh, from which one?
From Spotlight.
Oh, Spotlight. Yeah,
I had Mark Ruffalo because I'm an Oscar obsessed kind of guy, but I had Mark Ruffalo winning the supporting actor, and it was Mark Rylance, and I was like, Mark, and I was like, oh, Ruffalo won. Oh no, that's not Mark Ruffalo. Damn it, man. But yeah, this movie Bridge of Spies deal with a real life thing that actually took place too, a historical story. Which is the story of Tom Hanks' character, another collaboration with Tom Hanks.
Right.
What do you think about this movie? Because it's not as well regarded.
I mean,
some people now are saying that the Post was better than Bridge of Spies.
I mean, I've yet to see the Post. We don't get the Oscar screener, guys.
No, we don't.
So hey, listen.
If you want to give us Oscar screeners,
Disney or who makes this, Fox, whoever. Give us this. Come on,
screeners, man. Screeners.
Saves us some money. We go to theaters. We support you. I will still support you. Don't get us wrong. We'll still see the movies.
If I get a screener, I promise I will always still go watch the movie in theater.
Absolutely. We love movies. We just want to see them a little early.
I like.
That's all. Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah.
Bridge of Spies wasn't as well. What do you think of this movie?
I actually really like this movie.
Yeah.
Man. I think what Spielberg was going for is more about what's the court, the public, the criminal court going to rule versus the court of public perception, right? You know, and their parallel storylines again. He does that really well. Mark Rylance is under criminal prosecution, right? He's a spy. He's coming. They're trying to unravel him, and he's just not budging to any extent. Whereas Tom Hanks, he's a dude who. You know, his family has to go in the hiding, and he's undercover, and he's trying to, you know, protect this dude, but it's like, you know, the people aren't for him, so it's like where's that the ideological conflict at? So it's a lot of interesting themes that they're going for.
It's crazy because the amount of persecution this guy must have gotten must have been crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if I was thinking about it, you know, brushing up on this movie. It's crazy. Even I was thinking about it. I was like, even if he did this now, he would still get like he would still get a lot of shit.
Oh, seriously, yeah.
And doing it back then, damn, like that must have been crazy. The amount of hatred he got, and the amount of like basically like you traitor is like the kind of reception he probably would have gotten.
Right.
Is absolutely like I don't think I would have been able to do it. Just but yeah, it's the idea of the law and the idea of what kind of protections America gives you versus being burned by the public and being burned by patriotism.
Right.
And how patriotism can be something that people can cling to so much so that they don't care about the individual.
Right.
It's basically what it is.
Exactly.
And it has a lot of great scenes. There's a scene in the prison with Mark Rylance, and there's obviously the courtroom stuff is great, but yeah, I think it got a little bit of unfair. It's obviously not in the level of Lincoln or something like that, but it still is a very solid Spielberg movie that gives a lot to it, and it's an interesting period piece of that time period because when you read up and when you watch some documentaries and when you watch some, you know, historical stuff of that period, man, like some people would have rather died than to accept any form of like communism or like anything red, or it was just crazy.
Well, that's really crazy. You know, that's the bigger thing that you're going for in this movie, like the McCarthyism era of like, you know, the government blacklisting people and trying to find people who are potentially
and even if you say a comment that sounds kind of like that, or even if you say something, it was just like crazy, man.
Yeah.
The type of stuff that they were dealing with back then was pretty gnarly. Like that's why it's called like the Cold War, because in a sense it was still kind of a war that was going on.
It was like a war against the people, essentially. You know, a war against ideology. And I think this movie really highlights that. And Mark Rylance, I mean, listen, he did beat Stallone, which did upset me a little bit. And
he beat Mark Ruffalo, which upset me too.
Yeah.
No one cares.
I mean, I don't want to. The Spotlight came out a long time ago.
Spotlight is great, man.
I don't know if he was the best performance in that though. I would have given that Oscar
Liev
to
Schreiber.
Liev Schreiber, yeah.
I like Mark Ruffalo, but all right, whatever.
Yeah. No, but I get where you're coming from.
I like Creed was my favorite movie that year, so I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I still felt like Michael B. Jordan kind of got.
He got shafted.
Yeah, he really did.
Yeah. Fun fact, by the way, if Stallone would have won, it would have been the first time in Oscar history a white actor would have won an Oscar being directed by a black director.
Oh, that's interesting.
That would have been the first time to happen.
Really?
Yeah, because
Fassbender didn't win for 12 Years a Slave. He was nominated, but he didn't win, did he?
Nor Shame, yeah. No, he didn't. And the first time a black actor went under a black director was Denzel for Training Day. But any other, like no other, you know, that wouldn't have happened. So that would have been a piece of history nobody would have talked about, I think, but I just thought it was funny.
No, that's kind of interesting for sure. Yeah, guys, that was our Bridge of Spies conversation. Let's see.
Ended on Creed.
let's read on any comments that you guys might have given us from last week. What would you say? This is a comment that was kind of bold, but Tanashi says, "What do you think is Steven Spielberg's worst film, and what is his most underrated film?"
Worst. I mean, I don't know about his worst.
I actually might put Kingdom of the Crystal Skull up there as his worst.
Really?
It's that
Okay.
bad. It really is bad.
Mm.
1941's not great. What was the other one? I haven't seen.
To be fair,
some
we
other
didn't see
ones.
Always. So.
I didn't see Always.
That could be the worst. We just haven't seen
Underrated.
it. We said Munich before.
I did say Munich, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna stick by Munich. I would say Munich is his underrated film.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. Underrated. I mean, I don't know. Because Catch Me If You Can is on near the top for me, and I just don't know if it's on the top for everybody else. But that'll be near the top for me, and I think that's a really good one. We also have another one from Mr. Schmoes Beardo here. Brian, he asked, why does Hook get such a bad rap?
Because it's very cheesy.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of over the top, and because again, that character of Hook is, it's kind of bad. It's
Right.
I mean it's just not great.
Right.
And because justice for Rufio. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. I just feel like that it's a little too over the top. So
Right.
that's my response to Mr. Beardo.
Right. Another one here from Sam DeGlando, who writes, what is your favorite scene from any of Spielberg's films?
Kitchen scene from Jurassic Park's up there. The rain scene from Jurassic Park's freaking up there.
Mm-hmm.
The cliff scene from The Lost World is something that I would rewatch so many times as a kid because I was like, this is so incredible.
Should we take the Saving Private Ryan off the table? The opening scene for that?
Yeah.
So that would probably be mine, but I think that's too easy.
Yeah, I don't think that's too easy. I think that's just great.
Yeah. I mean, Saving Private Ryan has a lot of good ones, with like the sniper scene we mentioned before. I would personally say Catch Me If You Can, where Frank and Tom Hanks' character, I always forget his name, but they meet up in that
Hotel room or what is it?
not the hotel room is a great scene too.
Oh,
The
I was gonna
motel-
say.
but I was gonna say like the check printing warehouse in France.
Gotcha.
Like that to me is, I mean, it's not, to me that's the best Leonardo DiCaprio acting. Like I think I've ever in any of his movies.
Gotcha.
Just in that scene. So
What
that's
do you
probably
mean?
up
You
there.
didn't like when he was grunting in The Revenant? When he was like, oh.
Cutting horses open like his goddamn Star Wars. I don't know. You know, a little crazy.
Brian Fernandez says 2 questions for you guys. What is the worst Steven Spielberg movie? We kind of just answered that. And what is the most overrated Spielberg movie? Overrated. That's different from worst.
Well, what's on his filmography that's like, what most people regard. Well, no, you know what? These kind of questions are baity, man, because like overrated. I mean, listen, I'm not. Fuck, I don't want to. People put Jaws.
Say it.
Okay, you know.
Say it.
Here's what I say. People put Jaws at the top. I wouldn't put it at the top. So does that make it overrated? Technically. Does that mean I don't love it? No, I love the movie. But is it my favorite? No, it's not my favorite. So by definition, it's overrated to me.
I'm going to say a controversial one.
What's that?
Overrated. I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, it's still good.
Yeah.
I'm just saying Minority Report.
Really?
I like the
Oh.
concepts they deal with. I just feel like they go a little too,
Too sci-fi in there?
yeah, they just drag out a little too much with certain things, and they don't get as specific enough as I want them to for certain moments in the film, specifically towards the end of the movie. It's still great. I just feel like there's still some quirky stuff in there that didn't work for me, and there's
Right.
still moments that I would have done away with.
Though I will say Minority Report maybe has my favorite line out of any Spielberg movie. That's like when he says,
This is what we'd call an orgy of evidence.
I don't know why. That line just sticks to me like glue. Like, I don't know. That's a funny line. You know what? Going back to underrated question, I mean, I don't know if we got an underrated question, but if there's an underrated movie, I'd definitely say AI is my most underrated.
Oh, got you.
yeah,
yeah, I'm
definitely,
with you
without
on
a
that.
doubt, yeah.
Any other ones that you see?
I think that's pretty much it. That's
Cool,
all
man.
we got.
All right, thank you guys for sending in those questions 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, it wasn't as many as we wanted it to be, but
Hey, it is
that's
what
what
it
you
is.
guys sent us, so that's
Yeah.
what it is.
Right.
If obviously we let you know last week what's your favorite type of genre Spielberg film. We're gonna ask you what's your favorite historical Spielberg film, and obviously on a personal level, what does Spielberg mean to you? We'll throw that question out again just because it's a good question and we like reading different responses. Give us a story, guys. Tell us a story in the comment section. Give us a story of your first time watching a Spielberg film. What was that experience like? Who did you watch it with? Why did you watch it? Because I think they're always interesting, and I think it's always fun as a child experiencing a Spielberg film for the first time. So let us know what's your first Spielberg film that you ever saw, and what did you remember seeing it from? I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And this is the Meaning of Podcast, guys, where we dive into the deeper meaning of your favorite filmmakers' films. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share. Share as much as you can, guys, because we're here for you guys. So if you guys want us to talk about anything, let us know. If you guys feel like we need to bring something up, let us know. Follow us on Twitter as well, because we're on there. Munich, which during the Olympics at that time,
Like 1986 or something like that?
yeah, something like that, or 76 or something like that.
Yeah, something like
But
that.
but it's one of those movies that deals with the craziness that took time from what would you do during the situation and what people were going through during the situation. Are you good, bro?
Wait, I had to take a break, man. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. Oh, fuck. I know you just see me, like, flipping out. Just like, oh. Fuck, I thought I was going blind.
I don't know why I thought it was so funny.
You see me, like, literally dying here. I'm like, oh, fuck. Oh.
It's like fucking alien coming into your eye. And I'm just watching that. And I'm not saying shit. I'm just like, oh, by the way, there's a fucking alien in your eye. And you're slowly like, what is my face? Oh, yeah, by the way, dude, you don't have an eye. Fuck!
Oh, fuck.
What happened, dude?
I don't know, man. I don't know what's happening.
Did you have an allergic reaction, maybe?
Nah, I don't know what it was. I don't know. It's probably like looking at lights for too long. My eye look fine now.
Fuck, dude, fuck. Yeah, you're good, you're good.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, I don't know what that was about, but...
Oh, man. I don't know why that made me laugh so fucking. I laughed because I let it go because I was like in my head I'm like, do I fucking let it go there?
Yeah, my eyes are like literally.
What I do?
I've been out.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Let me clap again. And.